Hey everyone, we're here with the Holy Macro Show. A lot going on lately in the energy space. Everybody keeps asking so many questions about what's going on here with energy. We're going to try to answer all of those for you guys today. Definitely want to stay to the end because there's definitely going to be a lot of stuff we want to go through. Movements in bonds, movements in the dollar. We're going to cover it all today. So first off, Kashop, tell us a bit about where you're at. We talked a little bit about off mic the last few weeks. The situation that you've kind of been in. I don't think a lot of people in the United States really understand what's kind of going on over there. So can you explain a little bit, where you're at, where you live, what you're trying to do currently?
Sure. I'm from India. I live in Dubai, and I was fortunately I was on a break in India when the war broke out. But I couldn't go back, and it's a good thing I didn't go back too. But now I was kind of stuck. So what do I do next? So I hopped on the flight to Sri Lanka, and here I am. So I'm just traveling to the south of Sri Lanka. It's a country I really love. It's beautiful. Been here before. I have a lot of friends here, and shout out to any Sri Lankans who are listening to this. You guys are awesome people. So I've been here trying to figure out what to do next because I mean this looks like this war might drag on for a few months, and in that case, then I need to find a more permanent base. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm looking at Thailand, Cambodia, any spot in Asia where I can just uh, shelter for I don't know the next few months and then figure out my next move. So I mean, this is not a situation I ever thought I would find myself in. Like Dubai is considered, I mean, UAE, Oman, pretty much the entire GCC, they're considered safe countries. Yeah, you have things going on in Israel, Palestine, you have things going on in Egypt, Lebanon, all those places, you have things going on to the east in Iran and all these stans. But this little part of the world was considered to be a peaceful place to be. And Dubai, especially, it is the financial capital. It's like uh, no no one in South America will think Panama is unsafe, right? It's kind of like that. Or no one in Europe would think Switzerland is unsafe. So Dubai was kind of like that. And then things just fell apart in the last 2 weeks. So it is getting crazy now. So the longer this goes on, then the more disruption there's going to be in everything, especially because everyone's kind of dependent on the Middle East for, I mean, all the stuff that keeps life going. So whether it's fertilizers, chemicals, oil, you name it, it all comes from the Middle East. And we're already seeing shortages, a lot of it, in fact. So Thailand has said work from home because they're running out of fuel. I came to Sri Lanka, and then the next day they hiked fuel prices by 9% because they are preempting the shortages and the fuel queues. Back home in India, the lines are crazy. The fuel lines are crazy. I think it's something like the US in the 70s. So that situation is happening. And we use LPG gas for cooking, and there's a shortage of that. So restaurants are shut down throughout India. Sri Lanka, fortunately, so the reason I chose this country is because Sri Lankans have lived through an economic crisis in 2022. So when it gets really bad, they know how to kind of manage it. So I'm here and I'm just trying to figure out my next move.
No, it's really interesting. That's part of the reason why I think like people in the States need to hear these things because most of the time, like we have no idea. Like we're currently we're kind of insulated from a lot of things. We haven't had situations like that come up, neither have you. So it's an interesting thing to just think about because the people don't think about like what other countries could possibly be hit from this type of a situation and what's going on all over the world. In the US, obviously, we're just going to continue to raise prices and basically grind people to the end. That's kind of what we do here. And people can afford it for the most part here. So that's another thing that's important to be said. But at some point, it's going to get out of control. And I do think like these type of situations can happen here. Like I think that's the thing that is a bias of a U.S. citizen is that they don't think anything can happen here. They don't think we could have, like I mean, I grew up when I'm 40, so growing up we had the 98 where the hedge funds basically what was that long-term capital? Is that long-term capital? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
they blew up Wall Street at that point, and then after that, you have the dot-com bubble, and then you have 2001, and then you have the recession. I mean, like, and then you have the great financial crisis, and then housing becomes crazy unaffordable. And then you have COVID, and then you have inflation. Like, there's a lot of things that have happened to us here in the United States that people just kind of forget about because it's not pertinent to them currently. But hopping into some of these charts, just talking about what's been going on, where we're currently at in the market, and what we're seeing. I think that we're looking at gold prices right now on this chart, and so many people have asked this question, Kashop, and I'll answer it first, and I know you probably have an even better answer than I do, which is when you're looking at gold prices, I keep getting the question, why isn't gold doing better with global turmoil and war and all this stuff? Dude, if you've seen gold over the last couple years, like number one, there's no correlations that's one in one. There's no like war happens and then gold goes up. There's no war happens and oil has to go up. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I've been in scenarios where it didn't. I've been in scenarios where gold's just crashed on a war situation. Like this continues to kind of be a very similar thing. But once again, the overall trend is what you're trying to look at. The overall trend is up. I mean, even think about COVID. That's basically global turmoil as much as possible all over the world all at once. Gold went down, but did it go down badly? That's the thing that you have to think about. Like if the stock market, the S&P 500 crashed, what was that? 40% during COVID, and then gold, I don't even remember what it went to, but I guess it's right here. I am looking at a chart like I'm not. So it was what 1600 ish down to 1400. I mean, that's barely anything. I think maybe if I'm looking at candlesticks, it might say it went to feel like it was like 1700, 1400 was some type of range it was in. That's a very small move in comparison to everything else you're in. It's the same thing here. Like, why isn't gold doing better? Well, it is doing great in comparison to everything else. That's barely a pullback when the entire S&P 500, the Mag 7, all these other stocks all over the world are going down, and gold is holding up really well. So I think it's more, where do you want to be in this type of environment? Do you want to be in a situation where you're in something like gold, where it's going to hold its value, probably not go down as much as other things? Or do you want to be in something that could go down 20, 30, 40, 50, 80%? And the answer to me is obviously gold. I think that's going to continue to be the winner, and it's still showing relative strength even with everything going on. So, Kashab, do you have anything to add to that? Because I know fundamentally there's probably some thoughts you might have here.
yeah. So if you look at gold, not just the futures, at the actual metal, and if you look at people who hold the physical metal, well, what do they hold it for? They hold it so that in times of emergency, they don't have to take counterparty risk. Your banks are closed. You just exchange your gold for cash and you're safe, or you move with your gold. Now, it is kind of a time of emergency. Now, if you look at who owns a lot of gold, Iran holds, the Iranian people, they hold a lot of gold. The Turkish people, they hold a lot of gold. Pretty much everyone in the GCC, the Middle East region. So Dubai is kind of the trading hub for all the African gold. So everyone holds physical gold. There's a big culture of owning gold. Now your country is in crisis. You probably have some economic issues as well, or you're just scared and you're building cash reserves. So what do you sell? Well, you go look at XYZ stock, which is down 40%, and you think maybe I should wait for it to rebound. And you look at gold, which is at all-time highs, and you're like, yeah, okay, let me take some profits on this. It served its purpose. I'll catch it later. I'll rebuild my gold position later. So usually what happens in times of turmoil is that the best performing asset gets sold first, while the losers are liquidated at the end. So the assets which are going down. So as a trader, you want to kind of do the reverse, but typically people do not do that. They sell whatever has been working and they hold on to whatever has been not working. So
Yeah.
gold is gold is facing that situation right now. So I guess it consolidates for a bit, maybe even goes lower, 4,500, 4,400. I do not know. I think that's possible. And from there, I think we are going to see a resurgence once the money printing resumes, once this panic selling, all of this abates, and people kind of get used to a more long-term war scenario. Like just as how Russia and Ukraine now live with the war situation, if this situation continues in the Middle East, people kind of start to move on with their regular life inside the war zone. So once that happens, I think you're going to start to see gold recover from here. But it could be a few months, and I would not be surprised to see it go down in the interim.
Yeah, I don't think that's impossible. It's more just that it probably won't go down as much as other things, and that's important to think about sometimes. And that doesn't mean like as a trader, you're short term, like you can be out of the market, like that's a thing. Like I've had to talk to a couple people lately and be like, you can just be in cash. If like it really like, especially like you're super short term, you're trading in and out of things very quickly. You're looking for big moves very fast, and this isn't the market that's giving it to you. Go ahead and get in cash. Me being long term, it's fine to have a little bit of volatility. I expect it more than anything. It's more that when the trends are breaking, I'm going to change some things. And currently, I don't see many of these trends breaking. I see that they're holding up very well. I see that gold is actually holding up very well. I see GDX is holding up very well. I see silver is even holding up very well. Even with that pullback, that was a nasty pullback, happened very quickly, but it continued to hang on to its primary trend, which is pretty phenomenal to think about with a 30% pullback. So once again, it's like you continue to see the precious metal space looks really good, and the individual stocks inside of it still look really good. Now, once again, this thing is in a massive uptrend. It's been going up for a while. Just to parrot what Kashop said earlier, this is something that people could sell. It wouldn't be that crazy. So I think a little bit of a sell-off wouldn't be a big deal. I think it would be completely normal here. But once again, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say like I think the pullback's going to happen or it's intimate or it's imminent. I think that the scenario here is for this to continue higher because the trend is still up. And when that trend changes, I think the scenario for it is to continue lower. So there's just a bunch of things about the gold and precious metals market, but I think it's more of like, let's just kind of not get too crazy about it. And if you guys are watching, guys are enjoying the show, make sure to retweet it, share it on YouTube, and definitely come over to YouTube if you guys are on Twitter. We can talk to you a bit more. You can talk in the chat, ask questions, and so on. So definitely share this because we got a lot of stuff to get through today, and we think it's important. So here we go with the S&P 500. Now, it's very rare, and Kashop can probably remember a total of maybe 3 times in the entire history of me doing anything where I even talk about the S&P 500. It's very rare. I could give a shit less most of the time, to be honest. I don't trade it. I don't trade it on its own. I know some people, they trade calls on it or they trade the futures, and that's their main vehicle. I think there's, for me as a trend trader, there's things that are going to generate more alpha. So I'm going to be in those areas, not hating on it the other way. It's just different trading styles. So if I'm trading, let's say the S&P 500 or the US stock market, so to speak, I'm mainly in the sector futures or sector ETFs or something that's going to generate a little bit more alpha than being in the SPY ETF, for example. So looking at this, we're looking at Bollinger Bandwidth on the bottom. There's no label. I don't know where that went to. Sorry about that, guys. But this is Bollinger Bandwidth on the bottom, meaning the volatility of the product we're in. Up here means high volatility. Down here means low volatility. Most of these low volatility phases have led to some sort of a pullback. Here's another one. This is kind of at the end of that, what was that? The regional banking crisis that happened in 2023. And then it bottomed out right there. So like, it's not telling you exactly what direction the move's going to be. That's an important distinction when you're looking at Bollinger Bands. Bollinger Bands will never tell you what direction this is going to go in. They just tell you that a big move is coming. And here, it looks like a big move's coming, but what comes into telling me which direction this is going to go? That's where the technical analysis comes in. Here we have the lows from December of 25. And we're still above that zone. And for me, it's if we really break down there, this is probably going to get kind of nasty pretty quickly. I don't know if it'll be a quick pullback, very similar to what we've seen over the last few years, but I think this will probably just break and go down quite a bit more pretty quickly before it goes back up, if anything, and possibly the start of a bear market. So there's a reason why I say that's possible. Even though I'm still bullish, I do have plenty of positions. They're mainly in the sectors that are working. I'm not in the Mag 7. I'm not in technology. I do have a semiconductor position. That's it. So Kashop, I wanted to ask you, what are you thinking about the market here? Do you think we're in a scenario where, the S&P 500 is going to continue to head lower? Do you think a bear market's going to happen? Do you think we're still in a bull market? And I'm just talking broadly. Obviously individual sectors, Kashop and I have positions, in some of these commodity-based sectors, material-based sectors, and so on. That's not what I'm talking about. Just broadly, the S&P 500. What are you thinking here?
So if you notice the price action over the last few days, especially, it is obvious the dollar is rallying. Now, along with this dollar rally, bonds are selling off. So, including the 2 year. So, what does that tell you? It tells you that money is moving into cash and not cash like instruments like short term treasuries. It is moving into actual cash. And that's the same dynamic that's affecting the S&P 500. Now, for a lot of people with retirement accounts, they might treat the S&P 500 as a cash equivalent vehicle because in the long run, stocks always go up, right? So that's the thinking. But right now, what's happening is investors are deallocating from any risky position, including bonds, including the S&P 500, and allocating more to their cash position. So when you see this dynamic happening in sync with the S&P kind of looking like it's ready to roll over and valuations have been overextended, Max 7 is a bubble, AI is a bubble, we all know that. So when you see all these dynamics playing out, then I think the answer is obvious. I think we are going to have a lot of pain until the next Fed chairman comes in with the money printer and says, let's go, send everything up, let's print. Like in COVID, I think they printed something like $1 trillion in 10 days or something like that. So I think they're probably going to print a lot more this time and send the S&P higher. But until then, I think we are going to be, probably until May, I think we are going to have a bear market, like a proper bear market. And that's something no one's prepared for.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just a scenario here where it's like nobody's prepared for if we lose the Mag 7, for example. Oh, you got a hater here. I love the haters. I still got, somebody said Kashop's biggest loser on X. I get these like once every 2 weeks, and like, what's crazy is like I don't even think about them at all, but they come out of the woodwork all the time. It's like I got this guy I haven't seen him for a while. And I actually started to respect him. I was like, damn, you've got some serious hate in you that gives you so much motivation to get up every day, check the oil price, and then hit me up. So basically, since I posted that chart, that cycle chart of oil, and I was just like, oil would be next, didn't say to buy it or anything. He would just be like, huh, you're down 10% since you did this. You're down 5% since you did this. Look at oil today. Is it going up now? And you just call me stupid and all these names. And I would just say, like, just joking back to him about really ridiculous things. And then after a while, I was like, man, he's got some serious angst about this, and he gets up every day to do it. It's amazing. So I respect the haters. So Jesus or whatever, respect you. Thanks for coming. Please continue to hate. We appreciate the hatred. But once again, that's a situation where it's like, okay, you're looking at, oil. Now oil's up, and I haven't heard from the guy. So once again, I'm sure, this person will go away at some point, but we're always losers to somebody. And that's the thing that everybody should remember. Everybody's an asshole to somebody else. Everybody has some hater out there. You just got to laugh at them and have a good time with it. So
Yep.
getting to the next thing. So this is a question for you, and this is probably, I noticed you had a lot of haters start to come out when you started talking about Bitcoin and getting out of Bitcoin, even though you were really right about it. That's the craziest thing. It's like you were really right about it. Like it was near the top at that point. It wasn't exactly at the top yet, but you've had these positions in Bitcoin, for as long as I've known you. Going back to what 2015, 16,
2016.
17?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, going back to Bitcoin in 2016, you had it. You finally closed out some of those positions, And then it kind of rolled over. It's been pretty nasty ever since. Went all the way to 120s, coming all the way back to 65,000. Now it's at 72. Do we think that this thing has legs? I wanted to ask you, are you still paying attention to the fundamental story at all for Bitcoin? Because I'm personally really, I use it as a trading vehicle. I run a system on it and a model on it. But I'm wondering, on the inside of it, what are you thinking about Bitcoin? Do you think that this has legs? Do you think that this thing's done for a while or possibly forever? What are you thinking?
So I think Bitcoin and pretty much same applies to Ethereum and Solana. All these cryptos have legs right now, and the reason for that is the war. So Dubai, as everyone knows, it's a crypto hub. It's a great place to be in crypto. And if you are in crypto and you're in Dubai, you're kind of like the hot money because you're not exactly made to buy a home. You like it for the lifestyle, you like it for the crypto friendliness, but you probably have a second passport, you have a second residency elsewhere, and you have all those setups. So when you want to move in and out of the country, what do you do? Well, you come into Dubai with your USDT or Bitcoin or whatever, and you buy real estate and you settle there. And then when you want to get out, what do you do? Well, you do the same trade in reverse. And right now we are seeing a lot of the crypto capital, a lot of it is moving out of Dubai, moving out of this region, in fact. So when that happens, what do they do? Well, they have to buy Bitcoin back, which is why if you look at USDT to the AED rate, the Emirati Dirham rate. So if you look at the exchange rate, it's kind of going at a premium right now. And the reason for the premium is because people are more willing to exchange their AED for USDT rather than USD. I mean, you can just wire funds out. Banks work just fine. But the crypto crowd, they prefer their USDT and Bitcoin in self custody. So that's what they are doing. I think that's what's leading to this price rally. So you can kind of see it ebb and flow along with the news cycle. So, for instance, when the war first broke out, Bitcoin rallied, and that was the crypto guys getting their money out. And then when it looked like things might stabilize, that the situation would be controlled, then it dipped again. And now, when you have more news of more strikes and more chances of escalation coming in, you're seeing crypto rally again. So, I think this move has legs due to real demand for Bitcoin in its original use case, which is an asset that you can self custody just like gold, but transport it easier across borders because transporting gold across borders is more difficult. So, I think Bitcoin is meeting the use case that it was made for, hence this rally. Now, I don't know how long this lasts, and I don't know if selling by other Bitcoin holders in other parts of the world will overwhelm this form of demand. But right now, it looks to be stable, and I think a rally from this point probably can go 10-15% before it stabilizes or fizzles out.
Yeah, like I think it's really showing some relative strength currently. Like that's the thing that I'm always watching when we're having, and this is something for everybody to just do. Generally, this is a good practice if you're trading, which is if the market is in a drawdown and something is happening in the market, look for where the relative strength is. And sometimes that relative strength is just going to be outperformance to the downside, meaning, for example, COVID, the S&P 500 down 40%. I don't know exactly what semiconductors were down, but they were nowhere near down as much as the S&P 500. And then semiconductors were one of the leading sectors of that year of 2020 after that bottom. And that usually happens every single time you look at relative strength. Right before the election in 2020, a lot of that was in financials, small caps, even some international areas at that point. And then at the end of 2020 through 2021, those really led the way. Energy and so on were the biggest winners. So, you continue to want to see where the relative strength is flowing, and that's how you can make some money. Also, secondly, this is weird to even talk about because I didn't expect to talk about this stock much ever, but it keeps coming up on my scans, which is Western Union. So very similar to the idea of Bitcoin here. So I don't know, like some people are like Western Union has a story around crypto. I think Western Union's main story is the fact that we have, there's people from different countries when they move to different places, they're trying to send money back home. Western Union's a very simple way to do it. And once again, like you can do that with Bitcoin, you can do that with crypto, but are we at a point where everybody is ready to do that just yet? And the answer is no. I think more and more people are starting to do that over time. But Western Union is a place where you've always been able to do that, and that kind of continues to be their bread and butter currently. So it's weird to see that stock kind of moving nicely, like starting to move a little bit, showing relative strength in this type of environment. But I just want to point that out because it also goes with the crypto story too, because I think both of these in their own way are kind of part of that same trade. Let's go back to shipping, and I think Freely mentioned this the other day. I can't remember who exactly was talking about it, but somebody also said, "Hey, you should talk to Kashop about shipping." And I was like, "Yeah, no shit." So, anyways, shipping to me, it looks fine. I would expect volatility, like it's like we're in a war situation. There's a parking lot basically in the Middle East currently in the water. No shit. There's a canal situation. There's ships that are going to get blown up. There's ships that are going to get taken out of the water. It's ships that are going to be very expensive in a very expensive parking lot. There's a bunch of things going on right now in the shipping space. So what do you think about the shipping stocks though? To me, it's more of like I expect a pullback here. I expect the volatility, not to mention just because I expect volatility to an insane degree in shipping stocks at all times because they're the most volatile stocks out there. I mention this all the time, but the reason why if you go look at their dividends, they all pay a very high dividend. Why do they do that? Because they want you to hang on to this thing because there's going to be some rough times. There's going to be some volatility. But as traders, it's a great trading vehicle. And Kashop knows the space just about better than anybody that I know. Going back to 2019 into 2020, you were talking about how this space was kind of set up. Was it you, Freely? Sorry, I couldn't remember exactly what it was. But you were going back to 2020 and talking about this space getting ready for a big move, and then 2020 happens. We have this huge move in the shipping space. So, what are you thinking here with shipping? Do you think you've been talking about it? I know you were talking about some names not too long ago, but now we're here. Do we think that this still has legs, or do we think this is kind of over because of the war situation?
So I wouldn't say it is over, but that said, I'm very cautious about what I buy right now. And the reason is because I think overall investors across the world, they are starting to deleverage. So in a deleveraging situation, the best stocks, the ones where, like, if you look at the chart of Frontline, for example, it's up and to the right. Now, when it's up and to the right, that's the easiest stock for people to take profits in. So you should expect corrections. So it's the reverse. So if a stock is just going down all the time, then it probably rebounds, like the SaaS stocks have done. If a stock is going up and to the right, then people are going to take profits. So definitely expect the volatility. And that said, so shipping, the reason it is inherently volatile is because these companies have both operating and financial leverage. Now, what do I mean by that? So your operating leverage, think of it this way. So for $100 in revenue, let's say you have $90 in expenses. Now, the $100 in revenue, it is set by the market. So that's the rate at which the rate that you get when you hire your ship out for a day. So that $100 that can fluctuate. It can go to 80, it can go to 120, which means you have tremendous leverage in terms of whether you're going to make a profit or a loss, whether you're going to make a huge profit or a huge loss. And these companies, they take debt to buy those vessels, which means they have financial leverage, which means on an equity base of 1 billion, they have 3-4 billion worth of ships and the corresponding amount of debt. So now in this situation where you are exposed to both operating and financial leverage, what happens is the good times get really great, the bad times get really bad, and there's a whole lot of in between. So what you have to assess is whether you're somewhere in between or you're at the end of good times. Now, I would say a war situation, and especially you brought up Frontline, which is a great example because the founder of that company, I think he made his, I'm not sure about this exactly. I think he made his first billion in the Iran-Iraq war. And the reason for that is wars are very, very lucrative for shipping companies. Repeat of that situation. And in that case, it's going to go up a lot. Now, I don't own Frontline, but uh, I was worried about their debt situation. I do have something smaller, and I'm already up 100% on that stock, so I'm happy to let it ride. But if you ask me whether you're new to shipping, would you take a position in a shipping stock right now? I would say just wait for investors to start deleveraging. To
Oh,
be
we're losing you.
huge when it happens. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're
Yeah,
good.
I would just say, okay.
No, go
I would
ahead.
just
Finish up.
say this is not the right time to be buying. You need to wait for a pullback. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I think it's a.
I mean, yeah,
Oop, we're breaking up. Try shutting down a couple
yeah,
things on your computer and see if it works any better. But yeah,
sure.
so we got a frontline, and I think that's, for me, I'm hanging on to this one. But I just like a shop said, like there's a lot of reasons to expect more volatility going forward. And I think we will continue to be very volatile in that space. So a couple things I wanted to highlight, which are going to be fun to talk about with Kashop today, which is April crude oil futures. So I talked about this a little bit yesterday. So crude oil makes a big move, and everybody goes, "Yep, that's the end of it. It came back. Like that was this day where it went up to 120, closed the day. I feel like it was like down to like 85 or something. Can't even remember exactly, but it had a huge move, gave it all the way back, and then some, and now it's moving back up again. So that's significant, but I want to talk about what matters. Now, this is the front month contract, meaning the next month's contract to expiration. So when we're looking at futures and the futures curve, we want to see if the other contracts are moving just like that front month contract. And so this one isn't anywhere near those highs in 2022, which was around $130 during the Russia-Ukraine crisis. But if we go to December crude, it's above those levels. Very significant. Now, once again, the price is going to be different, but this is also a situation that's actually important because you see the last price, and this is something that's a lesson for people to start learning about futures. This is $95 in April crude oil, $74 in December. So there's a big discrepancy there. And what that also tells you is that as we're moving forward, we're getting paid to roll our contracts in the next month. Usually that's a very bullish sign. It tells you that there's some supply dynamic going on, some demand dynamic going on under the surface that we're not exactly seeing. Now, once again, there's a war situation. Obviously, we have supply and demand dynamics currently, but this is kind of telling you that this move's sustainable. Now, we always talk about this, and me and Kevin Green talk about this all the time, and maybe I'll see if Kevin can talk this weekend or next week some night. But looking at crude oil, it reminds me of the situation that always happens to Kevin and I in natural gas. Natural gas will have this big move in the front month contract. I will not get a signal because the next month, because I usually don't buy the front month contract. Usually I'm a few months out at the very least. And so my signals will not hit because natural gas has not gone anywhere. It hasn't done anything really in the other contracts, but the front month contract could be up 20, 30%. And these contracts that are, let's say December, for example, it could be up, 2%, 1%, something like that. That's something that is telling me that this is going to be very short-lived. It's all concentrated in that front month contract, and this is going to crash back down pretty soon. But if we go to crude oil and we get into December, we're seeing the opposite scenario here, which is that this thing is still ready to move higher. This does not look anything like natural gas usually looks when it gives it all back. This looks completely different. This is a scenario that is very sustainable. Donald Trump, I feel like, said today or yesterday, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something about the fact that this will be, he talked to the G7 leaders and said this will be done soon. So this is something I want to talk to you about, which is like, history just like I do. And you also live in this area and know a little bit more about it than even I do. So getting into Iran, for me, I'm thinking like there's no way in hell this ends soon or easily. Like they want it to. I think people in the United States go, look at Venezuela has happened. We went in there, we took over their country, and they just came out with their hands up, and that was it. And that's because we're the United States. We have so much money and blah, 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 and this and that. And so we're going to go into Iran now, and the same situation is going to happen. And anybody who's actually studied history or knows anything about Iran knows that they would rather die than just go and do that. That's not a situation that they're interested in. Then it goes all the way back to the 50s. Mohammad Mossadegh, basically they had a leader. We wanted him to sell us their oil a little bit cheaper, do a couple things that we wanted them to do. They weren't, Mossadegh wasn't interested. We ended up overthrowing the country, putting him in jail, starting riots, all types of shit. And then we got the Shah of Iran in office. And then once that happened, we basically got their oil for very cheap. And we were cool with them for a long time. And then that kind of changed over time. And also, like, they've always held on to that belief that the West is pretty evil. And now looking forward, and not to mention, here's another thing to think about: the best oil to refine is out of Iran. That's another thing to think about. So it's not like a Venezuela situation where it's like, oh, we're going to get all this oil and we're not even set up to really refine all of it. This is a very different situation, and I think it's going to last for a very long time. People keep tagging me and Jim Cramer saying the same thing. Look, I don't. Number one, Jim Cramer. Let's give him his flowers for one thing. He has a show. People watch it. I don't watch it. I don't care about it. I don't listen to the guy. But also, he has a show. People watch it. Great. But people have been dissecting that dude's calls one way or the other. Everything he says is wrong. He's not wrong about everything. Nobody could even possibly do that. Now, I don't know. I'm going to tell you honestly, I don't know the timeline of this, but I know the fundamental story that they're not planning to just turn this over like Venezuela, but Kashab. So I'm wondering what you're thinking, and I'll get to that in a sec, Freely. But what are you thinking, Kashab, about the Iran situation, the length of this war? Do you think it's going to end anytime soon, or do you think that this is something that could be sustainable for a while?
So the only way it ends anytime soon, and I think Calvin on Twitter put this out pretty well. It's like the only way this ends is if Trump apologizes and shuts down all the US bases in the Middle East, basically giving them what they want.
Yeah.
Now, short of that happening, this is not going to end. So, no, I don't see this ending, and I see this drawing in more players, and it's going to force the GCC to take a stand as well, the end of neutrality. So, just like how Switzerland broke their neutrality, I think all these countries have to decide that no, we are going to break our neutrality and take a stand, because failing that, the attacks aren't going to stop. The attacks on the GCC countries, it's not going to stop. Iran has made that very clear. The US has also made it very clear that they are not going to respect Saudi or UAE or Oman airspace. They are not going to respect these countries' sovereign rights, and they're just going to have their planes fly however they want, do whatever they want. So, in this situation, it's just going to become bigger, all out, long drawn out war. And for Iran, the Strait of Hormuz is a strategic weapon. So their ships can pass, Turkish ship can pass, whatever vessels they want, they can say, yeah, okay, you can go. And the ones that they don't like, they're just going to hold it up there. They're going to attack it. So they have all the leverage here, and that's the picture that people are missing. So there are probably more, but there are three countries that I know of which have never been colonized. One is Ethiopia, and Mussolini tried it briefly, failed. One is Thailand, and Thailand avoided colonization by giving away Cambodia, Laos, some of their territories. And the third is Iran. Now, this is a nation with a very long history of avoiding colonization. This is a nation which has been treated pretty poorly by the United States, from instigating coups to sanctions to Trump 1.0, where he comes in and says, yeah, I know my predecessor and the UN, we all agreed to lift sanctions, but I'm going to decide that I'm going to put sanctions back on. And then he does that. And then, so they have seen a lot of bullying by the United States. So now that they have decided enough is enough, it's like the worm has turned. And in this situation, they are not going to go back. So I think it doesn't matter if it's mutually assured destruction. I think that destruction will happen. And I think we are all going to have to prepare for shortages in everything, because from chemicals to fertilizers to anything made with oil to your gasoline, aviation fuel, everything. I think shortages of material things, all the luxuries that we take for granted. I think we are all going to have to prepare for a world where we cannot take those basic necessities for granted, and that's going to be the outcome of this war. Now, how long will the American public or the public in the EU and other developed countries, how long will they stand for this? I think that's the only question. So if Iran can draw this out until the population start turning against the government and they say, end this war, leave the Middle East alone, I think that's the victory for Iran that I think is inevitable at this point. And I think the misery is going to continue until it gets to that point.
Yeah, I think it's it's a very dynamic situation that people just aren't understanding that it's not going to go the way we all think it is. And that's the thing why, like, it was just what it was a few days ago. You had the oil price jump over 100, and you got Donald Trump coming in saying that we're good now, that everything's fine. That's going to continue to happen, just so you guys know. And once again, oil is just going to be very volatile. Understand that fact that it's going to be very volatile. Like if you're a commodities trader like me, like you just know it. Like sadly, I have to wake up every day and know like some 20% move could come back 20%. I could be 20% down at some point as well in the same position. I could be 50% up 2 days later. It's going to be very volatile. The only thing I do know is that I have to use very wide stops. I have to always base these on the closing prices every day. This is why you guys always see line charts from me, because that's a lot easier way to trade the commodities than looking at, candlesticks popping all around and wicks and so on. This is going to be the way to do it. Freely had a great question. So I don't understand, how is December $74 higher than April $95? So I'm assuming we're talking about April's price here is $95. And then, oops, wrong way. And then December took out those 2022 highs. Now, once again, these contracts are around for a long time, especially in very, very liquid products like something like crude oil or gold or something. These contracts can be around for many years. You could probably go out 5 to 10 years right now and start buying crude oil futures in December. So if you look at that and understand that fact, you're going to see the prices always jump around. Sometimes they're more expensive, sometimes they're less expensive. But if we go back to that same point, in 2021, we're looking at $45 for crude oil. Crude oil in 2021 was nowhere near $45 in the front month contract because it was $40 before the election happened. So it was probably more around $70 at this point. And then we made it all the way to $130 in 2022. Now, we see that breakout here and say, okay, well, how is this one higher than the other one? Well, the answer is the structure of the curve is different. So there's contango and backwardation. This is going to get a little technical, but it's really easy to understand if you guys, go Google it even, look into it more, start looking at the futures curves. You'll get it very easily. Bar charts are a great place to just look at the futures curve for free, and you can see every contract really easily. And so it's in backwardation currently. So if we're in backwardation, that basically is saying that those prices, the spot price, let's say right now we're around 100 in the spot price for oil. And now we're seeing that these other contracts are cheaper. That's backwardation. Usually tells you, like I said earlier, demand or some supply issue is imminent. Something is happening under the surface that we want to pay attention to. Usually this leads to higher prices. So mainly it's these contracts are all going to be different price, which means different breakouts. Think of them as different vehicles. They are not all exactly the same. Obviously, they are the same vehicle. They are still crude oil, but think of them as kind of different vehicles, and you'll get an easier understanding of this, because it's kind of like looking at options. You go out like 6 months on an option, it's going to look the price is going to look very different in the same strike than it is for a 0DTE option, for example, for today compared to 6 months from now. Don't trade 0DTE, by the way, just a FYI. So getting into some other things, I wanted to cover a couple things before we have to go, mainly currencies. So I wanted to point this out, Kashop. You'll find this interesting. So if we're looking at the euro, versus the US dollar. So the euro is the biggest input to the dollar index. The euro looks like shit right now, to be honest, and very technical. So looks like trash. It's breaking down. It had this breakout, gave a false breakdown signal, or sorry, a false breakout signal, came all the way back down. Now it's breaking down once again. Doesn't look good, and it was one of the leading currencies last year. So the euro did really well. I think the Swiss franc was actually first. Euro might have been 2 or 3. But then if we look at the Aussie dollar, and this is what I want to get to, is that these commodity currencies are actually holding up really well. Now the Aussie dollar has been one that's been it's been a laggard, to say the least. It hasn't looked good for years. It did kind of bottom out very similarly to the other currencies in the beginning of 2025, but it actually came down even further, made a new low, and then it kind of just chopped around side up and sideways for a long time. And then it got a big move coming into this year. And now when we're seeing oil moving, now we're seeing the Aussie dollar start to move again. Now that's something to pay attention to because this isn't as nearly as big of a weighting in the dollar index. And so it looks like some of these currencies are actually holding up pretty well. Even if you look at some emerging market currencies, they're holding up very well. And then here's the dollar and oil. Everybody keeps talking about this one, and this is one where me and Sam have this debate all the time about it, and we have a bet on currently about if oil's going to go up with the dollar. Sam definitely believes oil's going up with the dollar. I definitely think oil is probably not going up with the dollar. But here's the scenario, and here's where things get interesting. If crude oil looks like this, and let's say the dollar starts looking exactly the same, we're probably headed towards a recession. That's something that's very important to be said right now. I know I'm bullish. Everybody can see my portfolio who's a member on Against All Odds Research. You guys can see I have a lot of long positions. I'm not at the point currently where I'm saying like, hey, it's time to pull the trigger and get out of everything and start shorting everything. I think there's a lot of weakness in the market out there, so I'm definitely on edge about it. I see that we're possibly moving into stagflation. And so if we're possibly moving into stagflation, that's usually pretty bad for the stock market. But also I see this one thing here, which is a real big tell of something nasty that could happen, which is the dollar and oil going up together. This doesn't like this wouldn't be a sustainable move. Most of the time, if you're seeing, the energy trade, let's say, you see the dollar move down pretty heavily right when oil started to make a little bit of a move, kept moving, kept moving, kept moving. Dollar's just chopping around, oil's looking good. And then right around this point, these kind of get correlated together. This only is very short-lived. People think that's something that can happen for a long period of time. It's very short-lived because you're talking about higher gasoline prices for everybody in the world. And then you're also talking about lower liquidity for everybody in the world all at the same time. This usually leads to some sort of a bear market, some sort of a crash, something bad happening. And right about this peak point is when we saw the bear market in 2020 really start to take off and have some velocity to the downside. So I would like everybody to just keep in mind, we start to get, let's say the oil stays strong and we start to get the dollar above 101. To me, 102 is a real big level. We get above 102, that's taking out all those weekly closes and monthly closes. That's a big zone to get past. And if these look similar, I hate to say it, but I'm pretty sure that's a bear market or a recession. So Kashop, what do you think about that? Do you think we're headed towards bear market recession here in the United States or even globally? There's a lot going on. So what are you thinking about that?
Absolutely. I think we are going to have a stagflationary recession, and almost no one is prepared for that. And the reason no one is prepared is even if you can see it coming, how do you prepare for it? Well, you can own gold, but gold probably, like we said earlier, it goes down the least, it doesn't go up. And you can own oil, sure, but crude oil futures, these are physically settled contracts. So where do you store the oil? That's another dynamic. Like we look at numbers on a chart, but the fact is, a lot of these contracts are physically settled. So it doesn't exactly work the way that we think it would, meaning that you can buy it and hold it for the long term. No, you cannot. So how do you prepare for a stagflationary global recession? I do not know. So we just have to deal with it as it comes, be nimble as traders, and maybe he who has the least drawdown wins, and that's going to be the scenario. So let's see.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we need to kind of do here is just continue to. This is the thing for me as a trader, which is the reason why I'm always looking for strength. It's like people right now, people are like, oh man, energy is so strong. I need to buy something cheaper. Great. Short term, that'll work sometimes. Long term, that isn't going to do shit for you. Long term, you have to be in what's strong and ride trends. And however that, like, whatever way you do it, fundamentally, technically, that's the way you're going to make the most money. Look through it historically, that's the way to do it, because you're only looking for a couple of these huge winners and you're trying to keep your losers small, and your winners, let your winners run. Old trading adage there. But last but not least, let's get through this real fast because I got to jump in a sec. So TLT, I still have it in my head, and once again, let's just keep it very simple. It's just been in a nasty downtrend for a long time. 152-week high right here. That's it. Just continued to move lower. The 52-week high this time was actually really close because it's been so tight and zero volatility in this thing for quite some time, and it couldn't even hit that level. And now it looks like if oil continues higher, like, this is the thing, people keep asking this question. I'm just going to pass it to you because everybody in the world, hell no, leaps on TLT. Hell no. I do not want anything to do with TLT right now, at all. But Kashop, to pass it to you, what do you think here? Because everybody's heard me pontificate and talk a little bit too much about this scenario, but what do you think here about TLT and oil? So many people think that these can go up together. Puts on TLT
No
sound
way.
better, but yeah. So what do you think about TLT and oil moving up together and people saying that?
No way.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely no way. Oil going up, dollar going up, yeah, still possible. You're building cash, and uh, something wild goes on with the physically settled oil market. Yes, anything can happen. TLT and oil going up, absolutely no way. So TLT going up, what does that tell you? It tells you that people are preparing for lower inflation. It tells you that people are more willing to trust the credit of the United States and the dollar. And oil goes up, telling you pretty much the opposite. So there is just no way to reconcile those two views. So I don't think it's going to happen.
No, hell no. I mean, that's the thing that it blows my mind that it's constantly a conversation. I think it's a short-term thing, right? It's like you see for a minute, a couple days, like even a couple weeks ago, which actually wasn't exactly the case. You saw this little rally that happened in TLT, and oil and energy were doing pretty decent at the times, but even oil was under a little bit of pressure during that point. Um, and either way, like, there can be short-term moves where these both kind of rise together. Think of 2019, for example. Kashop and I were trading through that. There was a period of time in 2019, actually, at this point, where energy looked okay. It wasn't doing anything good. It was just stuck sideways, very similar to how TLT is today. Energy was stuck sideways, and then TLT was rallying, but you had some days and some weeks where energy was rallying with TLT. But in the end, energy fell off a cliff. I mean, a big cliff right here into 2020. So boom, all the way from, I think it was $60, $70 at that point, 60, I think at most, actually, that year. Didn't go up much. And then it crashed all the way down to negative 50 in the front month contract, really, $10, $20 in the other contracts. So you're looking at that same scenario led to oil crashing. And then when oil started to bottom out and move higher, TLT started to just move straight down in a dramatic fashion. So right around here is where oil's kind of topping out. That's where TLT kind of bottoms and goes sideways. Energy went sideways as well, but this is still lower highs the whole way through. Now you could say there's a higher low here, whatever. But I'm always going to take the primary trend into consideration over everything else. So the primary trend is still down. Oil looks really good. What do we think would happen to something like TLT when a a CPI report comes out that says, we have 5% inflation? That's going to happen, you guys. Like, maybe that's not going to happen right now because the CPI is backwards looking. Like, if it's a March CPI, we're looking at February. But by April, May, like, you're going to see some pretty crazy CPI reports come out, and TLT is not going to like any of that. So definitely want to stay away from that. Definitely not something I want to keep. I want to be long currently. I am short the 30-year bond currently, so I'm going to just stay short and call it a day. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. I got to hop. Kashop, as always, thanks for coming on, man. Anything you want to leave the audience with today, or are we good?
I think we're good. Thanks, Jason.
Hey, thank you. All right, guys. We'll see you later. We'll see you next week on Friday for the Holy Macro Show. Thanks, Will. We'll see you guys soon.